I used to think my life with Clara was carved from something unbreakable, like the cliffs that line the coast near our house. She was radiant, sharp cheekbones, hazel eyes that flickered with secrets, and a laugh that could pull you out of any darkness. We'd been married 8 years, and I'd built my world around her. I'm James, a structural engineer, 36, with hands rough from drafting blueprints and a mind that loves order. Clara was a freelance illustrator, her days spent sketching whimsical creatures that danced across children's books. Our home smelled of her paints and my coffee, a harmony I thought would last forever. Started with a Thursday I'll never forget. I'd come home early, a rare break from a bridge project that had me tangled in steel and deadlines. The house was quiet, too quiet. No hum of her music, no clatter of brushes. I found her in the kitchen, staring at her phone, her face flushed in a way I hadn't seen since our early days. She looked up, startled, and shoved the device into her pocket. "You're early," she said, her voice a half step too high. I smiled, brushing it off. "Thought I'd surprise you." She nodded, but her eyes darted away, and that's when I felt it. A crack, small, but real. Over the next few weeks, the cracks multiplied. She'd vanish for hours, claiming client meetings, but her sketchbook stayed untouched. Her phone buzzed constantly, and she'd angle it away from me, fingers flying over the screen. I asked once casually who she was texting. "Just a friend," she said, and the lie hung there, sour and heavy. I didn't push. I trusted her. That's what you do when you love someone. You trust them until the evidence is undeniable. But evidence has a way of piling up. One night, she left her phone on the counter while she showered. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe the way she'd been laughing earlier, a sound that wasn't for me. But I picked it up. The screen lit up with a message. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, gorgeous." No name, just a number. My stomach twisted, but I put it back, telling myself it was nothing. I wasn't ready to believe it yet. The next day, I couldn't focus. My drafting table blurred, lines bending into questions. Who was she seeing? Why the secrecy? I decided to test her. "Got a late meeting tonight." I lied over breakfast. Her spoon paused midair, and she nodded, too quickly. "Okay. I'll be working late too." That evening, I parked 2 streets over from our house, headlights off, and waited. At 7 p.m., a car pulled up, a sleek black thing I didn't recognize. Clara stepped out, her hair loose, wearing a dress I'd never seen. She didn't go inside. Instead, she climbed into the passenger seat, and they drove off. I followed, heart hammering, keeping my distance. They wound through the city, past neon lights and shadowed corners, until they stopped at a dingy bar on the edge of town. I watched from across the street as she slipped inside, her arm brushing a man's. A stranger with broad shoulders and a crooked grin. They sat in a booth, her hand on his, her laughter spilling out like it used to for me. I didn't go in. Couldn't. My chest burned, but I drove home, mind racing with images I couldn't unsee. The next morning, she was back, humming as she made coffee, acting like nothing had changed. "How was your meeting?" she asked, all innocence. "Fine," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I started watching her closer, every glance, every excuse. It wasn't just one night. She'd slip away twice, sometimes 3 times a week, always with a story. "Bookstore run," she'd say, or "client dinner." I tracked her phone once, a trick I learned online, and saw her at that bar again, then a motel nearby. The truth settled in. Clara was living a life I wasn't part of. I needed proof, something solid to hold on to when the doubts crept in. So I bought a tiny camera, the kind you hide in a smoke detector. I installed it in our living room, angled toward the couch where she'd sit texting late at night. For days, it recorded nothing but her sketching or flipping through magazines. Then, one afternoon, I got it. I was at work, checking the feed on my phone, when the front door opened. Clara walked in, but she wasn't alone. It was him, the man from the bar. Tall, tanned, with a swagger that made my fists clench. They didn't waste time. She led him to the couch, her fingers trailing his arm, and they collapsed together, laughing like kids with a secret. He pulled out a small box, and she opened it. A necklace, delicate and silver, glinting as she held it up. "It's perfect," she said, and he fastened it around her neck. My necklace, the one I'd given her for our 5th anniversary, was gone, replaced by his. They stayed an hour, tangled in whispers and touches, before he left. She sat there after, staring at the ceiling, a smile I didn't recognize. I watched that footage 10 times, each replay carving deeper into me. The necklace was the worst part. Not the intimacy, but the symbol. She'd traded my promises for his. I didn't confront her yet. Anger was building, but so was something colder, sharper. I started digging. His car plate from that first night led me to a name. Marcus Reed, 40, a sculptor who'd moved to town a year ago. Clara had mentioned him once. A colleague she'd met at an art fair. Now I knew better. Marcus wasn't just a fling. He was a parasite, sinking roots into my life. I found his social media, all polished photos of clay figures and smug captions. Clara's likes dotted his posts, her comments glowing with praise. I hacked her email next, a skill I'd never thought I'd need. There were dozens of messages, flirty at first, then intimate, then desperate. "I can't stop thinking about you," she wrote. "You're my escape," he replied. Escape from what? Me? Our life? I printed them all. A stack of betrayal I kept in my desk. The twist came in one email. Marcus wasn't just her lover, he was her collaborator. They were planning an art exhibit, something revolutionary, she called it. But the details were strange. She'd sent him photos of my blueprints, bridges, buildings, my life's work, labeled inspiration. He'd replied, "These will make it ours." My designs, my sweat, twisted into their project. It wasn't just her heart she'd given him. It was my soul too. I watched them more, tailing them to galleries, motels, his studio. Once, I saw her carry a canvas inside, my bridge sketches faintly visible beneath her paint. The betrayal wasn't standard, it was a theft of everything I was. I stopped sleeping, my mind churning with plans. Confronting her wouldn't be enough. I wanted her to feel what I felt. Stripped bare, broken. Revenge took shape slowly, a blueprint of its own. I didn't want quick pain. I wanted something lasting, cruel in its precision. Marcus was vain. I'd seen it in his posts, his strut, so I'd hit him there. Clara loved her art, her freedom, so I'd take that too. I started small. I contacted a lawyer, quietly securing my assets. She wouldn't get a dime when this ended. Then I dug into Marcus's past. A few calls, some old records, and I found gold. A plagiarism scandal from 10 years back. He'd stolen designs before, and I'd make sure everyone knew it again. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled man named Tom, to tail them. He got photos. Marcus and Clara at his studio, her wearing that necklace, their hands stained with clay and my dreams. I kept working, smiling at her over dinner, letting her think I was blind. The camera caught her saying once, "James suspects nothing." Good. Let her believe that. My plan was growing, and it would be beautiful in its brutality. The days blurred into a haze of pretense. I'd kiss Clara goodbye each morning, her perfume stinging my nose like a lie, and head to work where my drafting table became a battlefield. My hands sketched bridges, but my mind mapped destruction. Tom, the investigator, fed me updates. Snapshots of Clara and Marcus at his studio, her laughter echoing in grainy audio clips. One recording hit hardest. "James is so predictable," she said, her voice light, like a clock ticking out the same old rhythm. Marcus chuckled. "Good for us." I played it again and again, letting it fuel me. I started planting seeds. At dinner, I'd drop casual comments. How I'd noticed her necklace, how I'd been thinking of branching out with my designs. Her eyes would flicker, but she'd smile, deflecting with talk of her latest sketch. I let her think she was safe. Meanwhile, I met Tom in a dimly lit diner, poring over his findings. Marcus had a show coming up, a big one, his masterpiece unveiling at the City Gallery. Clara's emails confirmed it. My blueprints were the backbone, warped into their twisted art. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was professional, a knife in my legacy. I decided to play their game. I contacted an old college friend, Lena, now a curator with connections. "I've got some designs," I told her. "Something unique." She was intrigued, and I fed her just enough vague sketches, hints of a collaboration I'd reveal later. I didn't tell her about Clara or Marcus yet. I wanted the stage set perfectly. At home, I left my drafting table messy, papers scattered with half-finished bridges. Clara noticed once, asking, "What's this?" I shrugged. "Just experimenting." Her smile was tight, and I knew she was wondering. The gallery show loomed closer, 3 weeks away, and I could feel Clara's excitement bubbling over. She'd hum while cooking, her fingers tracing that necklace like it was a talisman. I kept my mask on, doting husband, oblivious fool. But inside, I was forging something vicious. Tom dug deeper into Marcus's past, unearthing a gold mine. A lawsuit from a sculptor he'd ripped off in Chicago. The guy had settled out of court, but the evidence, emails, sketches, was still out there. I had Tom track him down. His name was Victor, a bitter man now, and he was eager to talk when I called. "Marcus ruined me," Victor said, voice rough over the phone. "Took my work, called it his, and left me with nothing." I told him about the show, about my designs. His silence was heavy. Then, "I'll help you bury him." We met in person, a wiry guy with haunted eyes, and I laid out my plan. He'd come forward, publicly, with proof of Marcus's old theft, timed to coincide with the unveiling. But that was just the opening act. I wanted Clara to feel it too, to taste the ash of her own betrayal. I started leaking hints online, anonymous posts on art forums. Big sculptors got a secret, stolen past coming to light. Nothing direct, just whispers to stir curiosity. Marcus's fans bristled, defending him. But the doubt was there, a thread waiting to unravel. At home, Clara grew distracted, checking her phone more, her brow creasing. "Something wrong?" I'd ask, all concern. "Just stress," she'd say, and I'd nod, hiding my satisfaction. The necklace gleamed at her throat, a reminder of what I was about to shatter. 2 weeks to the show, and I turned up the heat. I hired a graphic designer, a quiet kid named Eli, to mock up posters, fake ones, advertising Marcus's exhibit with a twist, inspired by the stolen works of Victor K. I had them printed, small batches, and paid a few street kids to plaster them around town, near galleries, cafes, his studio. Word spread fast. Marcus posted a frantic denial online, calling it slander from jealous rivals. Clara came home rattled one night, her voice sharp. "Have you seen these posters?" I played dumb. "What posters?" She didn't push, but her hands shook as she poured wine. I met Lena again, this time showing her my real designs. Not the ones Clara and Marcus had stolen, but new ones, raw and jagged, born from my anger. "I want a counter-exhibit," I said. "Same night as Marcus reads. Call it Foundations of Truth." She grinned, sensing the drama. "This'll shake things up." I gave her Victor's contact, told her to weave his story in Plagiarism Exposed, a sculptor's redemption. She didn't know about Clara yet, but she didn't need to. The pieces were aligning. At home, Clara grew distant, her excuses flimsier. "Late night at the studio," she'd say, and I'd wave her off, knowing she was with him. I checked the camera feed one evening. She'd brought Marcus over again, their voices low. "If this blows up," he said, "we're done." She touched his face. "It won't. We're too good." I smiled at my screen. They had no idea. The necklace caught the light as she leaned into him, and I added one more layer to my plan. Something personal, just for her. 1 week out, and the city buzzed with tension. My posters had done their work. Marcus's fans were defensive, but critics started digging, sniffing scandal. Victor went public, a quiet interview with a local art blog. Marcus rebuilt his career on my bones. The comments exploded, and I watched Clara read it on her phone, her face paling. "This is bad," she muttered, thinking I didn't hear. I kept silent, stirring my coffee, plotting the final blow. I visited a jeweler, an old man with steady hands, and handed him Clara's anniversary necklace, the one she'd replaced. "Melt it down," I said, "and make something new." He crafted a pendant, sharp-edged and heavy, engraved with a single word, trust. I had Eli design a box for it, sleek and black, with a note inside, "For your next masterpiece." I'd give it to her at the show, her own betrayal staring back at her. But that was dessert, the main course was still coming. Tom got me footage of Marcus and Clara arguing outside his studio. "You said this was safe," she snapped. "It was," he shot back. "Until someone stirred the pot." I grinned, knowing I was that someone. My counter-exhibit with Lena was set. Same night, across the street, a spotlight on my designs and Victor's story. Invitations went out discreetly to critics, artists, Clara's clients. She'd see it all crumble, and I'd be there watching. The night before the show, Clara barely slept. She paced, phone in hand, texting Marcus nonstop. I pretended to doze on the couch, listening as she whispered into a call. "We can still pull this off. James doesn't know." I almost laughed. The house felt like a pressure cooker, and I was the one turning up the heat. I packed my suit for the next day, the pendant box tucked in my pocket, and rehearsed my moves. This wasn't just revenge. It was art, my own exhibit of pain and precision. I met Victor one last time, handing him a stack of old sketches. Proof Marcus had stolen from him, mirrored in the new work Clara helped create. "Show them everything," I said. He nodded, eyes gleaming with his own hunger for justice. Lena called. My exhibit was ready, a stark gallery of steel and shadow, my bridges towering over Victor's testimony. Across the street, Marcus's show would open, oblivious to the storm. Clara left early that morning, claiming a final prep. I let her go, knowing she'd walk into my trap. The pendant burned in my pocket, a cold promise. Tonight, they'd unveil their stolen glory, and I'd unveil mine. Their ruin, piece by piece. The evening arrived like a storm rolling in, heavy and inevitable. I dressed in my suit, black, sharp, a blade of a man, and slipped the pendant box into my pocket. Clara had left hours ago, her voice bright with nerves as she'd said, "See you later? Maybe at the gallery?" I'd nodded, vague, letting her think I was still the clueless husband. The city thrummed with anticipation. Marcus's show was the talk of the art crowd, but my counter-exhibit lurked in the shadows, ready to strike. I drove to the gallery district, parking between the two venues. Marcus's space glowed across the street, all glass and light, packed with critics, collectors, and Clara's clients. My spot, Lena's gallery, was quieter, a steel gray box with my bridges looming inside like silent giants. Victor was there, fidgeting with his old sketches, his face tight with purpose. Lena adjusted a spotlight, grinning. "This'll be a night they won't forget." I agreed, but my eyes were on the other side, where Clara's silhouette moved among the crowd. I slipped into Marcus's show first, blending with the suits and dresses. The air smelled of wine and ambition. His masterpiece dominated the room, a sprawling sculpture of twisted metal and canvas. My bridge designs warped into its bones. Clara stood beside it, radiant in that silver necklace, her smile a mask I'd once believed. Marcus swaggered nearby, soaking up praise. I stayed in the back, watching, waiting. The crowd oohed and awed, oblivious to the rot beneath. Then I saw Victor enter, his presence a spark in the powder keg. Victor didn't waste time. He stepped forward, voice cutting through the chatter. "This isn't Marcus Reed's work. It's mine, stolen from me a decade ago, and now yours too, James." Heads turned, gasps rippling. He held up his sketches, yellowed but unmistakable, mirrored in the sculpture's lines. Marcus froze, his grin faltering. Clara's hand flew to her necklace, eyes darting to me. I met her gaze, unflinching, and she knew. The room buzzed as Victor kept going, detailing the Chicago theft, the lawsuit, the lies. Critics scribbled notes. Phones flashed. Marcus tried to laugh it off. "This is absurd. jealousy from a has-been. But the doubt was spreading. I stepped closer, still silent, letting Victor's words do the work. Then I spoke low but clear. And those bridges? They're mine. My wife and her lover thought they could take them. The crowd parted, staring at Clara. Her face drained of color, the necklace glinting like a noose. Marcus lunged toward me, but I sidestepped, calm. Check the emails, I said, nodding to Lena, who'd slipped in with printed copies. Clara's messages to Marcus, my designs attached. The room erupted. Critics swarmed the evidence. Collectors whispered, and Clara's clients backed away like she was contagious. She grabbed my arm, voice trembling. James, please. I shook her off, pulling the pendant box from my pocket. For you, I said, handing it to her. She opened it, the trust engraving staring up at her, and her knees buckled. Marcus shouted denials, but the damage was done. I walked out, leaving them in the chaos, and crossed the street to my exhibit. Lena's gallery was filling now, drawn by the scandal's echo. My bridges stood tall, stark and honest, beside Victor's story. Plagiarism exposed in black and white photos and legal docs. Critics trickled in, then collectors, murmuring about authenticity and raw power. Lena worked the room, steering them to me. This is James, the real artist. I nodded, letting my work speak. Across the street, Marcus's show was imploding. Shouts audible through the glass. Clara's silhouette slumping by the sculpture. I planned one more twist. Tom had rigged a projector outside Marcus's gallery, and as the crowd thinned, it flickered to life. Grainy footage played on the wall. Clara and Marcus on our couch, her wearing his necklace, laughing about me. The street gasped, then jeered. I watched from my side, the pendant's weight gone from my pocket, now a shard in her heart. Clara stumbled out, tears streaking her face, and saw the projection. She froze, then ran toward me, heels clicking. James, I'm sorry. I turned away. You're nothing to me now. Victor joined me, his own revenge complete. They're finished, he said, and I nodded. The art world churned online. Posts calling Marcus a fraud, Clara his accomplice. Her clients canceled contracts, his sponsors pulled out. My exhibit drew raves, my name rising as theirs sank. But I wasn't done with her. I'd saved the cruelest cut for last, a quiet one, just between us. The next morning, Clara came home, eyes red, voice hoarse. We need to talk. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee cold, papers spread out, divorce forms, asset splits, all signed. There's nothing to say, I told her, sliding them over. She stared, hands shaking. James, I didn't mean. You did? I cut in. You chose him, my work, over us. She clutched the necklace, his, not mine, and I stood, pulling a suitcase from the hall. I packed for you. Leave, she begged, but I was stone. The house was mine. Lawyer secured, and she had nothing left. As she dragged the suitcase out, I handed her one final thing. A mock-up of her revolutionary exhibit flyer, now stamped canceled in red. Your career's over too, I said. No one trusts a thief. She sobbed, stumbling to her car, and I locked the door behind her. The silence was sweet, but I wasn't finished. Marcus was next. I tracked him to his studio that afternoon, a crumbling space now tagged with fraud in spray paint. He was inside, packing clay into boxes, face haggard. I didn't knock, just walked in carrying a folder. Your old Chicago deal, I said, dropping it on his table. Victor's not the only one with proof. I've got names, dates, enough to sue you into the ground. He glared, but his shoulders sagged. What do you want? Nothing, I said, just to watch you lose it all. I left him there, a broken man in a broken dream. Weeks later, the dust settled. My exhibit toured, critics hailing me as a voice of truth. Clara vanished. Rumors said she'd moved to a nowhere town. Her art unsellable, her name mud. Marcus faced lawsuits, his studio foreclosed, his swagger gone. I sold the house, too many ghosts, and bought a cabin by the cliffs, where the wind scrubbed me clean. My bridges stood in galleries now, untainted, mine alone. One day, a package arrived, no sender, just the pendant I'd given Clara, snapped in half. A note inside read, "You win." I tossed it into the sea, watching it sink with the last of her. Revenge wasn't joy, it was closure, cold and final. I poured coffee, sat at my new drafting table, and started sketching again. The lines were steady, the cracks gone. I'd built something new from the ruins, and it was enough.